Welcome to the Money Insights Podcast, where high-income earners come to learn wealth-building strategies that will take them from high income to high net worth. With your hosts, financial and wealth-building experts, Christian Allen and Rod Zabriskie.
Welcome into today's episode of the Money Insights Podcast. I'm your host, Christian Allen. With me, as always, is my trusty co-host, Rodney the Pod Zabriskie. Rod, what's up, man?
Hey, I am doing great.
Do you want to introduce our additional co-hosts or guests, whatever you want to call them?
I do. I want to. So first we have Blake, never takes a break, Brogan.
Good job. Good job. I always say Blake the Snake, and then I'm like, well, we don't like the snake. But then I have to go back, and I get to never takes a break. But never takes a break. We're glad to have you, man.
Yep.
If you contact me, I'm ready. I'll respond quickly.
All right. Love it.
Sweet. Okay. And then we have Brennan, doesn't yet have a nickname. McConnell.
It's pretty clear that he's never going to have one. Let's just be really clear about this. If we haven't found one by now, it's over.
Yeah. But I don't want any nickname unless it's the general. You can call me the general.
Oh, okay. I kind of like it. Self-proclaimed the general. Brennan, the General McConnell.
I've been watching too many mafia shows, so that's
okay, well, that's good. All right. Well, obviously, if you guys listen to the pod, you know these guys. They've been on a bunch of times. These are key members of the Money Insights team. And if you're one of the clients of the Money Insights, you probably know at least one of these guys and maybe multiple of them firsthand. So I always like that we can get people who are, I'm going to call it out in the field, like actively talking to people, answering these questions. Sometimes I worry that I might get a little bit rusty. And so you guys come in and like make sure to keep me on my toes, and we deliver the good stuff. Okay, so we're going to talk about
the
this.
Youth keeps you fresh.
The youth keeps me fresh. Rod, well, I've got to balance out your oldness.
No, I'm the youth.
Some youth.
Wait a minute, I wasn't talking about.
You're the youth. You're the youth. Well,
self-proclaimed.
All right, Rod. I don't know how you're going to claim youthfulness in this group.
He's biohacking.
Now, let me be really clear. I think you're young and healthy and like spry, right? So I'm not talking, but like in comparison to the group, you've got almost a decade on us, my friend. So not quite that. 8 years for me. 8 years. Okay.
We won't do the math.
Here's what we're gonna do. Would you stop? I'm trying to get into the flow here, man. Okay. So we've got two parts. This episode's gonna be broken down into two parts. The first part is we're gonna be breaking down, discussing, fighting. I don't know. We're going to see where it takes us, but we're going to talk about the 10 most controversial pieces of money advice. Now, those are defined by me. And to be honest with you, there's probably a lot of other ones that could fit, but more or less it's 10 pieces of money advice that I find controversial. And it could be like pro Money Insights philosophy. It could be against it. You'll just have to kind of wait and find out. But we're going to go through and we're going to get firsthand our team's takes on those things. And then in part two, we're actually going to do a rapid fire game. And the game is going to be for these guys to try to get answers to these rapid fire questions. And the idea is to try to answer them the way that I would. Okay. Everyone keeps their own score. This is like going out golfing 18 holes. We expect honesty, right? So keep your own score. Okay. Let's jump into it. The first piece of controversial money advice that I want to hit on, this one's going to go to Blake Never Takes a Break. Brogan. Blake, owning a home is always better than renting. What do you think?
The term always is throwing me off. I would say primarily or over the long run, I can see that being a benefit.
Typically, usually any of those synonyms to like not always, but a lot of the time.
Yes, I would put generally owning a home over cycles, it's primarily going to appreciate in value. Primarily. Obviously, there's been times where housing prices have fallen. When you're renting, it's like buying term insurance. You're just throwing money at something that's not going to build any value for you. Now, again, in short time periods here or there, you're not planning to be in the area, or it's a transitory period. I can see why renting might have some lower costs overall, but generally speaking, if you look at just the history of how the real estate markets have worked, When you're owning a home, at least you're contributing to the principal. And, generally speaking, you're going to have appreciation of that home whenever you decide to move on from it.
Okay, so a couple of caveats to that. So my personal experience, the first home I bought was in 2007. And can I just tell you, it was the worst time to buy a house. I've told this on the pod. I remember my mom was like, Christian, if you don't buy a house now, like things are appreciating so fast, you may never be able to buy a house. And I genuinely felt that. So I jump in, I buy the house. My wife and I had done a real estate deal that made some money at the time. And so we were like, okay, well, we can jump in and buy this house. Well, as you know, 2008 happened. The values came crashing down. The good news is that I do have significant equity in that house that I still own today. But I think if I were to have done the math and I would have not purchased and then purchased maybe 3 or 4 years later, I probably would be far ahead. So I'm just giving a caveat, like maybe playing devil's advocate here to suggest that and maybe that goes to your point, Blake. It might go to your point of in kind of small situational circumstances that could change. But I guess one of the thoughts that I have on here is that it really just, no, this is a lame way to say it, right? The situation's the boss. We always know that that's true. But I think there's more often times where it could make sense for someone to rent. And I think there's been way too much renter's shame out there. People should have the flexibility and fluidity to do whatever makes the most sense in their situation. And honestly, I think that you could make a strong argument that, I don't know, maybe it's not 50-50, but my take is that we probably overdo this idea of you've got to own your home, when in reality, it really does depend on the situation. And many times it could make more sense to rent. Anyone have any takes that they want to add to Blake and I's?
Yeah, I'll jump in.
Mine and Blake's. Blake and me. That's right.
Yeah. This is just going along with both of you. I think it highly depends on what market you're in. If you're in a New York City, that's going to be different from a Tulsa, Oklahoma. And so in different situations, different markets, LA, Orange County, Utah, that I think is going to be a huge factor on whether it's better to rent and or own. And, to your point, Christian, how long are you going to be there? If you're only going to be there for a year or two, renting is obviously the choice. But if you're sitting there long term, then I think it's looking at the market and seeing, what makes more sense in that specific market, whether it's renting or owning a house.
I like it. I think I agree. We're probably all on the same page there. Okay. Thanks, Blake. I don't want to spend too much time on one because I've got a bunch of these. Okay. The second one, Rod, this one, we're going to start with you. And I'm going to change it a little bit. It said always max out your 401k, but I'm going to say, generally speaking, or typically, you should max out your 401k and qualified plans in general. What do you think?
Okay, so I have some thoughts on that. The first one is, I would say if you are offered a match from your employer, then I would agree with that statement.
Okay, so let's break this down a little further, just because I'm curious about this as I think about it. Would you say any match, or does it have to be like a significant match? What if it's like I put in $3 or $4 and they put in $1? Is that still?
Then it becomes.
You still feel that way?
Yeah, it's a good question. Okay, so 100% match. I would say you're always is a tough one, but I'm going to say
almost always.
Take that money.
Okay, Rod says always. I went with almost
match,
always.
25% match. Then probably still typically I would say yes. Okay. They're probably again could be some, especially if they offer you a Roth option and you're
good
in
thought.
your early career. Because I just think about my own experience where the time when I was contributing to the 401k and it was a traditional pre-tax money going in was the worst time for me to be doing that because I was getting money back from the IRS, from the federal government, right?
Yeah.
And you're like young, let's defer as much of this as we can.
Yeah, we were young. We had 5 kids. My income was whatever, like 30 grand a year or something. And so it was not the time to be setting money aside in a 401k. If there had been a match, then I would reverse that.
Probably still would have done it.
Okay,
right?
But my point was, now a lot of people have a Roth option. And so I'm telling my kids right now, they're in kind of their young career, kind of just getting started. And I say, yes, contribute, and absolutely look for the Roth option, contribute to the Roth option if it's available.
Okay. So Rod says basically, like in general, I think you're just saying like that's a true statement. In general, you should do it, assuming, that's the caveat of assuming you're getting a match for it.
Yeah. And fewer companies are offering matches. And so compared to maybe 20 or 30 years ago, probably more often the answer is going to be no now, just because that's not as
okay.
common.
So what if you said, so let's take this another step further and we move away from 401ks, which have matches. Let's say that the statement is you should always max out your tax deferred options. So now we're talking about individual IRAs, no matches on the table.
Yeah, then I would say it really depends on what you want to invest in. Because for most people, the only retirement option they have is to put it somewhere where it's going to be invested in the typical stocks, bonds, mutual fund kind of situation. And if you like that as your investment option, then great. But if you don't, if you would prefer to be investing in alternative assets, then that's not going to be a good option for you.
Okay. And then there is still the Roth element to it, right? So
yes,
even though we lose the match, like what we would suggest is go Roth. Now, maybe you can describe really quick why you're pro Roth and why that caveat makes a difference to you.
Yeah. So let's come at it from the standpoint of where I am, and that is I prefer alternative assets. I do invest in the stock market. I'm not saying I don't do anything there, but I prefer alternative assets. So my future, when I get into retirement, I'm going to have places I'm getting income that are tax free. I'm going to have places I'm getting income that are have tax benefits to it. And so I don't think I'm going to be in anywhere near the tax bracket when I am in retirement and taking this passive income as I am now. So I would rather be in a situation where, in that case, I want to defer the tax, right? I'd rather pay it later when I'm in a lower tax bracket than now. But if the reverse is true and I say, I'm really concerned about what the government's going to do with tax brackets, which is a very consistent theme that we hear. If I'm worried about where tax brackets are going, then I'd rather pay the tax today and not have to pay it later. That's where the Roth comes in, and I would rather be able to participate in the Roth. So
okay. So yeah, a lot of people don't realize, historically speaking, we have low tax brackets today. And when you look at the tea leaves, it just feels like it's going to be difficult to reduce taxes when you consider the national debt and deficit and that good stuff.
Yep.
Okay. Does anyone have any other opinions that they want to add to Rod's opinion on this?
I think the last thing I would say is just, I mean, this is to your point, Rod, but you are locking your money up in those accounts, right? So especially, just because the advice is like, hey, get started in this, put your money in here. We talk to people all the time that are like, I get why I was doing that, but now that I'm thinking about wealth and creating wealth and investing a little differently, I wish I didn't have such a large percentage of my assets locked up in these accounts. So as you're putting it in, it's really primarily got to be money that you're not planning to touch until you're, 59 and a half or whatever the number is at the moment that you can take it out without penalty.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And obviously, like, liquidity is so critical, and those don't represent a liquid asset, right? So we can't just tap into those any moment that we want to take advantage of an opportunity. And I think that's a good point. Okay, let's move on to our next one. Brennan, this one is for you, my friend. It's a fun one. You should buy term and invest the difference. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's completely wrong for a few reasons. So,
hey, tell us why.
The first reason is, how often does somebody here buy term and invest the difference and actually do it? How often are they actually investing the difference? I would venture out.
So the first issue, you're saying there's a gap. There's a gap between they buy the insurance, but the extra that's supposed to be invested just ends up being pocketed and spent on coffee and ice cream.
Yeah, definitely a gap. Now,
Okay.
I will say for somebody, maybe anyone making less than $60,000, $70,000 a year, that could make sense, right? Because that's the term life insurance is cheap. It's going to protect their family. And then hopefully they use the extra dollars and invest the difference. But there's probably not much that they can, invest the difference with.
Okay. So it sounds like, though, what you're saying then is when you're young, like you should just get the insurance.
Yes.
Right? The insurance is more important than what type.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And if you're young, lower income, right, and you have a family, definitely just get the insurance, get yourself coverage. And then you can decide whether it's best to invest the difference or actually go towards a permanent life insurance or max overfunded dividend paying whole life insurance policy later. Now, for somebody who's making a decent amount of income, 6 figures plus, that's where I think this, notion gets to be not true. And the reason is term life insurance is good, but with permanent life insurance, we can use it for so much more than just the death benefit, right? We can use it to enhance our investments, right? Make an additional layer of profitability to whatever we're investing in, whether it's in real estate, self-storage, hard money lending, any sort of cash flowing opportunities. And if you're making 6 figures plus of income, like Rod said earlier, it's not that we're saying don't invest in the stock market, right? I think people still want to invest in the stock market at some level, but you shouldn't be putting 100% of your extra available funds into the stock market. And so if you're not putting 100% of that extra capital into just the stock market, if you're actually diversifying and putting it into different cash flowing opportunities, then buying max overfunded dividend paying whole life insurance makes sense every single time.
Okay, I like it. Who has any thoughts to add or subtract from what Brennan said?
I would add also is that strategy sounds really good when you're 25, 35, let's just call it under 40 years old. When you look at the price of term insurance, it can be super cheap. Now, the reality is if you get a 20 or even a 30-year term policy, by the time you're 55, 60, the amount of people that we've met with that said, hey, I still like the idea of having insurance. When you're 25, you think, oh, I won't need insurance at 55 or at 60. But the amount of people that we speak to are like, it's nice to have this a couple $1,000,000 of death benefit. They still got a lot of things going on in their financial life. When you start looking at the rates between a 25-year-old and a 60-year-old, and maybe you've had a couple health setbacks or things like that, we're talking not just a few dollars more, but like many multiples more. It could be 5-6 times the amount. You go from paying $1,000 a year to now it's $8,000 a year or something like that you're not getting any value from other than the protection. So sounds good, but life changes and you're not always, you still may be needing insurance at, in your 50s and 60s.
Yeah, I think that's a big one. People say, okay, if you invest the difference, then you won't have that need. And I would suggest that you could invest the difference and you still very well both need and or want, right? So you suggested, hey, we might still need it at that point. How frequently do we have setbacks along the way that keep us from being able to reach that definitive goal that makes us financially free and independent to where we have no need for insurance? Well, most people, even when they get there, by the way, look at the situation and would like to have it because it then gives them optionality. It gives them the ability to use their assets in more powerful ways than having to default to the old 4% rule or something like that. So it really is one of those, for us, we believe in it as a foundational asset. So while there are plenty of situations that term insurance makes sense, I like the idea of buying term insurance and buying permanent insurance, because when we bring them together, we're creating the value and investing. We just have to do all three of them.
Yeah, I think the statement creates a false dichotomy. It makes you think you have to choose between term and permanent. And I think in a lot of cases, most cases, having both and investing, just it makes sense. Because to Brennan's point, you want to optimize the permanent insurance to accomplishing these other goals, but that may not provide for all the insurance that you need for your family, for business partners, for whatever happens if something happens to you. And so having both, I think in most cases, does make sense.
Okay, so I think that's good. Buy term and invest different. It might be the most controversial financial like principle or idea that just exists out there. People love it. It's such a fun debate. Okay, the next one, and we're gonna go back to Blake. Never takes a break. So Blake, hope you're not taking a break now because you've got a doozy here. The question is, do I buy the most expensive house I can afford? So that's my statement. Buy the most expensive house you can afford. What do you think?
I would be a hard pass on that.
Hey, tell us why.
Well, I would even say I just moved homes in 2024. And, when you go through like the mortgage application stuff, the amount of home that I would technically qualify for, like they were going to give me money to buy a mansion, like the nicest house in town. It's unbelievable how much you can get qualified for based upon your income. So the reason I would say not to do that is, even though my answer before said, housing markets, overall may appreciate, they all say that, to your example, Christian, that's not necessarily going to be the case. So even when you're putting money towards a home, you're not getting that money out until you sell the property, right? So it really is a cost still while you're living there. Of course, you can, get that money out at some point. But I would say live within your means. I'm not saying you need to buy the cheapest house in town too, but if it's a safe neighborhood and you can do everything you want, live comfortably, I would say be a little bit more on the conservative end and stash cash outside of your home as opposed to putting it in the sticks and bricks.
Okay. Blake is a hard pass on buying the most house that you can afford. What do you guys think? Anyone else have thoughts?
I would generally say that too, which you'd probably expect. But I also don't go to the other extreme. Some of the supposed gurus out there say you don't want to spend more than whatever, 20, 25% of your monthly income on a home. And I'm here to tell you that's putting a lot of people out of commission for buying and including myself. Yeah. When we bought our first home, we were at like 55%, which understandably would be like, oh man, that's putting me in the, well, you bought as much home as you could. Cause I would say, I guess we did, based on where our income was, but our income was going up. Number one, the market was strong. Number two. And so I don't have any concerns about, if my kids are coming and saying, well, man, what do we do even right now when interest rates are really high, when, whatever, people say you can't go buy a house. What do we do? And I'm like, well, let's look at the situation, make sure we find something that is comfortable for you, but let's not worry about, waiting until it's 20, you find something that's only at 20 or 25% of your monthly income. Cause that's
okay. So what does that number look like then? Like what percentages are we in? Do you guys feel like we're in safety zone versus, cause here's the thing. When I look at this statement, I think I know this is like totally opposite. My initial thought is, yeah, you probably should buy the most house that you can afford. Now, the question is, how much can you afford and how do we define what afford means? Because that's a pretty subjective word. But let's just say that in my world, my budgeting is 25% of my income can go toward my 20% of income can go to my house. That's what I feel like I can afford. Well, but I do agree that I shouldn't go ahead and get as much house as I can get qualified for, because I do think those two things are pretty different. Brennan, what are you going to say?
So my thoughts on this is you still want to have cash is king, right? So you still want to have plenty of liquidity. So my thought is if you have 12 months worth of living expenses, which is including the new mortgage that you're about to bite off, and you're putting at least 20% down on that home, I think that's totally fine. So if you're putting 20% down and you have 1 year's worth of full living expenses, meaning if you didn't make another drop of income for the next 12 months, your family doesn't skip a beat, including vacations, including any sort of trips or anything like that. I think that's a really good spot for somebody to be looking at a house.
I like it. So if the other ducks are in a row, then getting the house that we can afford makes a lot more sense, or it can at least.
Yeah.
Okay. You know what Lynn Rainier would say, Rod? Lynn would say you absolutely get the most house you can. Do you remember Lynn? He wrote, Wealth Beyond, what was it? No, that's not right. What was his book called? Oh, it's okay. Anyway, I do know that there are financial gurus who very much believe that you should buy the most house you can afford. And I think I fit somewhere in the middle of that. I think as long as the word afford is based on good principles, right? To the point you mentioned, Brennan, as long as I have those other ducks in a row, I say go for it, because obviously when the house appreciates, if I can have it appreciate by a lot more, then I might as well take it. So anyway, I think that's probably good on that one. Does anyone have any other thoughts? We covered it. Okay, our next one, and this one is for you, Rod. All debt is bad debt.
False.
All debt is bad debt. Wow. All debt is bad debt. Okay, so
Four-letter word.
Just straight up false.
Yeah, that statement is false.
Okay,
All
well,
debt is
you're
not
going to
bad
have
debt.
to at least back it up, right? Because what about my credit cards that are sitting in the back?
Okay,
Like
so if
30
you're
grand
saying-
at 27%. That's probably okay debt, right?
Yeah. So it is correct to say that there is debt that's bad debt.
Okay.
And so it would include, a credit, like carrying a balance on a credit card with, 15 plus percent, like 10 plus percent, right? Like
And carrying a balance is probably not a good idea to the extent that we can avoid it, period.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. Payday lending, all these kinds of things where
Ooh, yeah, those are ugly.
you just really have a hard time keeping up with any payments,
the
especially if you're in
problem with
desperation when
that-
you get into it.
Okay, well, that's what I was going to say. The problem with most of those types of things is that people go to those things when they're desperate. So like, of course they're going to be like, they're basically being like, I can't figure out what to do. I'm willing to dig a little bit deeper in hopes that I can find my way out. But guess what? Too often people can't find their way out, and it just ends up being a bigger burden on them. So like, there is certainly debt. There's no question that there's bad debt. But that's not the statement, right?
That's right. So, and the other thing that I see a lot of people doing is pushing that to because all debt is bad debt, or because there is toxic debt, you shouldn't go out and and set up the credit. So I'll give you an example. I heard someone say, well, don't get the line of credit at the bank, because their theory is, or their thought is that because you'll use it. If you have it, you'll use it. And I think we need to give people credit if they deserve it, right? I understand that there are people out there that if they have the credit, they'll use it. And in that case, you have to be very, very careful about how much credit you qualify for. But for a lot of people who have a healthy relationship with money and can be smart in the way they use it, having a line of credit is very important, because then when you get into those situations where you need it, it's available. If you get in the position where you need it and you don't already have it set up, they're certainly not going to give it to you then. And so then you're pushed to those kind of desperation kind of moves.
So it's better. You're just like suggesting it's better to have on the front end, right? If I'm going to be, and right now we're not talking about debt for investments. You're just talking about like generalized, like money that we could use if we needed to for our regular expenses and that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So in my mind, the next step is, and you can maybe extrapolate on this a little bit, Rod, but it's about what the debt is used for. Yeah.
Because I would say there are very healthy types of debt, right? So then as this is getting into when I buy my home, do I take out a mortgage? When I invest, am I willing to use debt, use leverage to amplify the returns that I can get in my investing? And in that case, I absolutely think that leverage can be enormously helpful in building wealth. Again, taking the step back and saying, as long as you are smart in the way you do it, you're calculated in how much debt you take on, so that you have liquidity, so that you're not over leveraging the asset and what it's able to produce. So the numbers have to work out, but there can absolutely be really useful and healthy debt.
Okay. I think that's fair. Does anyone have any thoughts on this? Before we move on to the next one? Okay. Man, we've got a bunch more of these. I'm excited for the next one. Okay. We're staying with the debt principle. So the question for you, Brennan, is, or I shouldn't say the question. The statement for you is you shouldn't save for retirement until you've paid off all your debt. What do you think?
I'm going with Rod here. False.
False.
True or false?
True or false? It's false. Okay, why?
Okay, so that's a dangerous thought, because that might mean that somebody's not contributing anything towards retirement or retirement planning until they're, if you're a physician that went through medical school and you got medical school debt, we're talking maybe 40 years old when they're starting to save for retirement.
So can you imagine you've got let's just call it like a full match 401k, right? Yeah. Or some sort of deferred comp, whatever. And they're making big money, but they're like, I can't put any money into this, even though I'm going to get a dollar for dollar match because I've got to pay off this $200,000 of. Now, I will say this though, there is the argument to be made that they would be able to go and pay those off a lot faster theoretically, and then start saving more. But so why don't I do that?
Well, I would focus, and this kind of sounds like a Dave Ramsey statement, both what you said to me and what I'm about to say back to you. But I would focus on bad debt. So if there is bad debt, meaning double-digit interest rates, get that out of there, pay that off. And I think once you get those double-digit interest rate, anything that's in the double digits, I think then you can start doing double duty, where a portion of your extra capital is going towards paying off the debt and a portion is going towards investing for retirement. Because compounding interest is huge. Like you have to get money working for you in your 20s if you can. And if you're not doing it in your 20s, then it's a priority in your 30s. You just have to get money working for you. And I feel like most people would be able to prioritize all of their bad debt being paid down by the time they're in their 30s. And I think that's a very doable position to be in for somebody, that has paid down debt and now they've got a little bit of debt, but maybe it's a car loan and a mortgage at that point, and we don't want to pay those off.
Okay, so they need to crush the bad debt using the shred method. Sorry, they should shred the bad debt using the shred method, and then they can. And really, the reality is, like, if I've got a full match on a 401k, I'm probably telling someone to make that investment, even if they have bad debt. Yeah. Even if they have bad debt. Crazy enough, right? Now, that doesn't mean that we don't use the methodology to try to get rid of that, is because it's a drag on us. But it's still not enough of a drag on us that we would want to eliminate 100% return from day one, as an example.
Yeah, and I didn't know we had access to the shred method. So now, assuming we have the mortgage, we have a HELOC. We'll take the HELOC. We're going to shred.
Yeah, we've got access. Absolutely. Yeah.
So we're gonna shred the bad debt in a matter of 12 to 24 months. We'll be done with the bad debt using the shred method with our HELOC, and then now it's off to the races.
Then we're just like really going to accelerate things, right? Yeah. Okay, I like it. Does anyone have any thoughts that they want to add or subtract from Brennan's take? I think I generally agree with it, Brennan. Okay, whose turn is it? Is it Blake Never Takes a Break? Is that where we're at?
I'm still here.
You've got a fun one, man. Here's the statement. You don't need a financial advisor. DIY is enough. What do you think?
I would say that exact statement is probably true. I don't think you need a one-stop shop. That being said, I think it's good to consult with various financial professionals. But the idea that I need to take all of my stuff to this guy, he plugs it all in his software, and then he tells me what to do. Basically,
could it be a girl, Blake? I'm just checking. Is that okay?
Yes, absolutely. Could
guy or girl? Okay, either one. I just wanted to make sure we're good. Okay.
Our one-stop financial professional. I am out on that idea. Totally.
I like it.
That being said, there's so much information available. There's so many investment groups. There's so many professionals that you can listen to. There's so many people who have maybe done the type of investing that you're thinking about doing. We've used the analogy of quarterbacking your own finances, but that doesn't mean you don't work with a good attorney, a good CPA, a good, could be a good financial advisor, insurance professional. Having those guys on your team, I think, is the way to go. But I'm out on the idea that like, hey, this guy manages my money for me.
Okay, well, Rod and I did a pod just like a couple months ago on this, and we agreed that you don't need a financial. Now, I'm not going to say that nobody should have one, right? Like there is a place for that for the people who feel like it's going to create value. But I like your statement, just like the quarterbacking element. At the end of the day, you don't want to pass off accountability on your stuff to somebody else. You've got to really own it. And so if you decide after owning your situation that you want to give a portion of it, again, let's say that a portion of my money is invested in a regular brokerage account, and I like the idea of having it actively managed rather than going to a Vanguard mutual fund, which you could probably debate whether that's a good idea. But nonetheless, let's just say I felt that value is there, then it's okay, right? Like it makes sense. But I think going back to that point, you probably don't need it in that typical like, hey, I turn over things to my financial advisor. They tell me how to manage my money. I think that's a bad idea. It usually gets people in more trouble. And that's a lot of the horror stories that we have with advisors and insurance agents goes back to this. People don't do the due diligence themselves often. They end up getting burned for some reason or another. And, it just puts a black mark on things. So I totally agree with you, Blake. I am 100% out on feeling like I need a financial advisor, but there might be some situations where I want one.
Here's a situation that I've seen, and it's someone who really is focused in the alternative space primarily. Again, they may have a 401k, they may have some money in the market, and they know enough to know that there are gaps in their understanding, or at least their ability to kind of put all the pieces together. So they'll go to an advisor who has a variety, has experience in a variety of different ways, so that they can actually help them put a plan together. And in that case, a lot of times it's just a fee only. They're like, hey, help me put a plan, help me create some structure around the investing that I'm doing. And so it's a kind of fee only thing. I'll say this, there are very few advisors out there who have the qualifications to do that. If you want one, let us know and we can hook you up. But that can be valuable too. If you're quarterbacking it, and you feel like, man, I just feel like there are inefficiencies that I could shore up. I just don't know how. I need someone to help me kind of look at it, have a good second set of eyes who knows what they're doing, can give me some recommendations, then that could be valuable as well.
So I would argue that it's primarily common sense. Financial planning, being a financial, I think that's primarily common sense. And so while I might want someone to do that, like, I don't think it's needed, right? Like I just genuinely think I can take that role by myself. And honestly, from what I've seen, people get these financial plans and they get it back and they're like, okay, well, I knew all of this. I was already doing all of this. And so I guess the good news is it's like, a written plan, or, it's now put pen to paper. And so there's value in that, but oftentimes they're paying way more than what they're getting for it. So I do agree, right? Situation's a boss. Sometimes it makes sense for this. I think more often than not, you can just do it yourself. Okay. Our next one. Thank you, Blake. Now we're on to back to Rod the Pod. And the statement is, you should stop diversifying and go all in on the things you know only. Invest in the things you know. That's what I'm really saying. All in on the things you know. What do you think? It's a little tricky.
It is not tricky. I don't think it's tricky.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because I think it's a tempting thing. It's like it's the thing that is really drawing people in, but I think you have to fight against it. Now you have to have a starting point, right? So if I'm at ground zero and I have to say, well, I'm going to start somewhere, I can't start with 10 different investments. I'm going to start in the one that I know and like best. I'll go there. But I think everyone should be building toward diversity, because if you only ever go with the one thing that you know and feel best about.
Okay, Rod. We need a backup. For just a second.
Help me out here.
I would say the things you know. Plural. Because I'm not suggesting what this statement is not suggesting is that I love Apple. That's all I know about. I'm just going all in on my Apple stock.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense? So the difference is between going all in on an investment and going all in on the things I know, the things I understand. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay. Yeah. And so I guess the reason I came at it from that direction is because we've seen this a lot where people, they know, like they've looked at a lot of different things. And then among all of those things, they pick one and they say, I think that one's the best. I like that one best because of XYZ reasons. And I'm going all in on that one. And it's just
dangerous.
A really dangerous thing to do. But it's tempting. It's because again, especially if it's something that I did invest in and I saw a lot of success investing with it, it's like, well, why would I go do anything else? This is where I've seen success. And just again, past success is not an indicator of future results. You just have to remember that. You have to remind yourself because it's just a siren that calls and you have to really push back on that.
Okay. So I did a Robert Kiyosaki stitch like a few months back, probably been like 6 or 8 months back. And it actually gained pretty good traction. And his thoughts were only invest in the things you know. And he gave an example. I know cattle. So and he gave these examples of like these weird things that he invests in because he knows them.
Yeah.
And I actually agreed with him. So here's what I would suggest. Here's my take on this. I do think you should only go in on the things that you know, but you should learn more things so you know more things. Does that make sense? So
Agreed,
it's not to go boom, just say, hey, this is all I know today. I'm not going to like expand my horizons. I'm just going to invest in this. But I like the idea that typically you're investing in things that you know, believe in, or comfortable with. I think that's kind of the Warren Buffett philosophy too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of, now that doesn't mean it's not diversified. And I think that's what you're suggesting is that just because we love gold doesn't mean I need to go 100% or 95% in gold, right? And we have seen those. We've seen people who get crazy about one asset and they're like, well, I read this newsletter. This newsletter said that this was going to be happening. I better do it. And of course, it never goes very well when that happens. So that's the kind of thing that we just like have to avoid. But I like the idea of focusing on things that I know, but I just need to like learn more, do more, right? And so it's one of those things where, let's say an investment opportunity comes to me, I don't have to just throw it out because I don't know it. Now it's a question of, do I do the due diligence? Do I learn about it so that I can understand it and potentially invest in it?
I like it.
That's my take. Okay, good stuff. Brennan, we are back to you, my friend. Now, actually, we're going back to what Rod was addressing right up front. Stop diversifying and go all in on what you know. No more diversifying. Okay? Does that make sense? We've got to go only in on the stuff we know.
Depends on how many things you know.
I feel like this is the same question.
Yeah.
As I'm doing it, I'm like, this doesn't really make. We're gonna skip that one and we're gonna go to the next one. Okay. This is maybe the best one of it. So this worked out great, Brennan. You got the golden one. Money can't buy happiness. This is gonna be our final one on this before we jump to our game show. Money can't buy happiness. What do you think?
I think money can buy a lot of things that produce happiness.
Okay. So, that's fair.
Here's the thing. I don't think money is just innately going to bring you happiness. I do not think that. I don't think somebody who, if you were to ask somebody that was worth $100 million, but, they were estranged from their children and didn't have a great relationship with friends, right?
So you're saying
miserable.
Every billionaire is not like incredibly just like content and happy?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think there are some pretty unhappy billionaires out there, which is a bummer. And I'd love to throw my hat in the ring to be friends with them if they're looking for some friends.
Okay, I like it. We'll see if we can get you there. I think that's a good thought. Oh, keep going. Sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I do think that money provides you with the ability to go out and create experiences with the people that you care about that does create happiness. And can those experiences be, can you have great experiences without money? Yes, you can. But can you have even better experiences with money? Absolutely. And so does money provide happiness? No, but it provides the opportunity to create memories that produce the happiness with you and your loved ones.
Okay, and I would add one other element to this, and that is that part of being happy is a reduction of stress and anxiety. And certainly having like my ducks in a row, being financially stable, can add to my just overall sense of calmness, security, financial well-being, right? Like I think in my own world, like my financial stress when I was in my early 20s was just like off the charts. And it feels very different today. And while I still have plenty of other things to be stressed or anxious about, it sure feels nice not to be stressed and anxious about that. So yes. Good thought. Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts? I think you pretty well nailed it, Brennan, but
agreed.
Okay. Should we move into part 2? Are you guys ready for the rapid fire section of our pod today?
Ready.
Yes.
Ready?
Do it.
All right. Blake, are you ready? I didn't hear anything coming from you.
I've got my game score sheet ready to go.
Okay, sounds good. Keep your own scores. We're going to do this quick. Game rules. Guests, guess how I answer. We'll review the answer and the reasoning, and then you guys have to keep your own score. At the end, the winner will get a prize, and we decided the prize is I'm going to take you. You guys are going to come take me to dinner, but I'll pay for it. Right? Is that what we decided?
Yeah.
Hey, I'll sweeten the pot. I'll send money for you and your significant other to go have a nice meal. So I want you guys to be like laser focused. Is that enough to get you guys focused? Do we need to up the ante?
I'm in.
Is that good? Okay, good. Okay, rapid fire 1. How would Christian answer this? Number 1, buy term and invest the difference. Is that truth or myth?
Myth.
What do you say, Blake?
Myth.
Okay, I went with myth. Barely. I was actually considering saying, well, there is truth to that, but I think in general, we're going to go with myth on that one. Okay, next one. Should never borrow against your 401k.
Myth.
Gosh, all of you are on myth?
I'm on
Blake,
myth.
you have a different one?
Yeah, no, I'm on myth.
Okay. All right, that one's also a myth. This one feels okay. Let's change this one. $2 million is enough to retire.
Myth.
True.
I'd say true for some people.
It depends on the person. Okay, but this is how is Christian going to answer this? So this is very much a myth.
Okay, I'm one
very
up.
much a myth.
I had to find my angle to get up one.
That was nice.
That was good. Okay, good. So our next one, you should always pay off your mortgage before you retire, not before you contribute to retirement plans. You should pay off your mortgage before you retire.
I'm going to go myth.
Myth. What you got, Brad?
Myth.
Blake?
Yeah, a myth as well.
Yeah, I'm going myth on that one. You guys are right. So have you guys gotten all of them right other than one?
Blake got
get them all right?
Blake's up
Blake,
one.
You've gotten all of them right. You two have missed one. Okay.
Yep.
I thought that was the end. Let's just end it here.
We're just getting started. No, I'm just kidding. We don't have too many of these, but okay. The next one. Renting is throwing away your money.
Myth.
That's too easy because I already went on a rampage about how I don't think it is, right?
We were all paying attention.
I'm like, that's true. Wait a sec. Okay. So that one is a myth. The next one, low-cost index funds are the best way to save if you're investing in the market. Ooh. This is a tough one. Low cost, like think Vanguard, we're paying next to nothing in fees. Like that thing's just keeping up with the S&P 500. Doesn't it sound good?
I'm going to say myth.
Myth, Rod?
Myth.
Blake?
I'm still split here, but I'll say myth. But okay. I could be wrong on this one.
Yeah, you guys are right. It is a myth. I would go more toward the idea that you focus in on things you know. And if we know Warren Buffett's philosophy, he says that you should have like 20 to 60 stocks, things that you understand and you know, rather than going as diversified. Now, I'll say this. I don't think it's a bad way to save. If I'm going to be saving in the market, I don't think that having low cost Vanguard mutual funds is a bad way to do it. That's the kind of stuff that ends up in like our deferred comp plan. And my deferred comp plan over the last couple of years has done like 25%. So not half bad, right? But you're right. That's a myth. Okay. Investing in oil and gas is generally too risky. Okay, so I feel like I should qualify this one. Let's say too risky for most people.
Yeah, I'll say
not me this time. Too risky for most people. What do you guys think?
Yeah, truth.
Yeah, truth.
What do you think, Rod?
Myth.
Oh, he goes with a
you gotta get
an edge.
He's got to try to find a way back. I
Most
actually think it is too risky for most people. Dang it. Now,
I
Rod,
knew that was true. You
could make a strong argument that as long as you do your due diligence and like learn about it, then anybody could invest in oil and gas, and that could be reasonable.
With
but
realistic
as a whole, I'm going to say it's a little too risky for most people to invest in oil and gas. Okay, real estate is the safest investment. What do you guys think? Dun dun dun. I should have played some music, like some na 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 na. But okay, what do you guys think?
Is this any real estate? What kind of real estate?
We didn't define it. Just real estate.
Real estate is the safest investment.
I'm gonna say myth.
I'm gonna say myth.
Myth. Blake?
Yeah, I said myth.
Okay. Yeah, that's not true. Real estate is a safe investment, obviously, or it can be, depends on how we use it, right? Could be risky if we're overly over leveraged, but certainly safest. Like you probably want to go with like treasury bonds, right? That's probably as safe as it gets. Although even that makes me a little nervous. So maybe high cash value life insurance, that might be the safest.
What I was thinking.
Okay. The next one, and we just have a couple left. So 2 more to make up Blake's lead. Alternative investments are only for the wealthy.
Myth.
Yeah, I guess that's a myth. It's one of those things, though, that is pretty prevalent, right? A lot of times people tune out the idea of alternative investments if they don't have large lump sums of cash. And so my thought here is that if we can turn more people to the alternative space earlier, they would just be so much further ahead, right? Because the same principles apply regardless of whether I'm investing a little bit or a lot. So I might as well be investing in the alternative space. So I agree. That one is a myth. And then my last one, passive income isn't truly passive.
True.
Yep, that's true. In fact, Rod, I think we did a podcast recently on this one too.
Yeah.
It is the most ridiculous phrasing that we do when we talk about this whole idea of passive investments. It typically means real estate that we're like bringing rent in or something. Yeah. But I look at that and I'm like, how is that anywhere near as passive as like taking, buying a bond and taking income from that, right? Like there's a lot more work typically in the real estate space. But that doesn't mean it's not incredibly valuable. It is incredibly valuable. It's just not truly passive. You've got to put some work in to get it going. And typically there's some work along the way to keep it going. Okay. So I think, Blake, you won the game, it seems like.
We got date night.
Congratulations.
Friday.
What's the score? What was the score?
I was
How many
100.
did you have?
I was.
Well, you just know 100%. Okay. So you got 10 points. Rod, you must have gotten 8 and 9. Yep. Okay. All right. Well, nice job, guys. I thought that was fun. Hopefully there's something that people learn from listening to it. I love talking about the controversial things. I mean, that's why we do the Dave Ramsey takes and that kind of stuff. But these are things that like people are continuously wondering about. So I just want to tell you guys that I very much appreciate your takes on this. And listeners, I appreciate everybody listening, and we will plan on seeing you next week.
Thank you for listening to the Money Insights podcast. To learn more about the financial and business strategies discussed in this show, please visit moneyinsights.net. The views and opinions expressed on the Money Insights podcast are not intended to be individual financial, tax, or legal advice. Always consult with the appropriate advisor before making financial decisions. And if you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. This will help others find the show and learn wealth building strategies for themselves. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll catch you in the next episode.